And that issue of services goes across the board and impacts a lot of different groups of people. And for instance, there's the people that have mental health issues. There are children that are in juvenile justice. And so here in Nebraska, we've seen this movement to return services to the community, which in many ways, you know, sounds great. But what do you think about what's happening?
Well, and 30 years ago, I was involved in mental retardation, where they deinstitutionalized a lot of folks. And what we found then was there were people that had skills and competencies, and there definitely were services that ended up being provided by the Office of Mental Retardation and ARC that, you know, were good for those family members to be able to get into the community. But when we have a wholesale closing of mental health institutions and put the kids out into the community, and at the same time don't do any funding for those mental health services, it's really going to be a travesty. The other part of it is to look at all of this as prevention, that's the future, and how much does going to prison or jail cost us? And there was a program called Try Another Way, where the YW in particular I know about, we served 14 to 17-year-old girls who had already been on probation, and it was a 12-week course, and it was actually taught by a probation officer, and it was developed by women at York. What would I have liked to know that could have kept me from being in prison? And so at the end of this 12 weeks, then what we were hoping is that those girls would make better choices and that the recidivism for those young women would go down. But, you know, that was, and it's one of those factors where actually the non-governmental organizations, the not-for-profits, could probably provide it more effectively and less costly than if it was offered, you know, within the criminal justice or within the government system. But it needed to be funded. And, you know, for a while there, it kind of is jumping from grant to grant to grant. And there's no assurance that next year that those monies will be available. So then these young women will come through having been on probation, and there won't be any support system or perhaps the decision-making or the group process that would have helped them make better decisions for the future.
Well, I think that would be really helpful to have your voice in the legislature to go and bring these issues to the forefront so that we hear about the needs of our families and our children, which you're so right. I mean, it is a prevention issue. It's so much cheaper to have people stay in school and not go into the prison kind of situation.
Well, and one of the examples I had recently, I talked to a woman that I consider a friend that said, well, she's in the highest percentage of income, but she resents having to pay so much in taxes. And she also resents paying for schools. And I kind of said, but gee, you're the most able to pay for it, and you should have the most opportunity to be helpful to someone. Plus, the children are our future. And if we're unwilling to pay for schools, then what's going to happen to kids? And how are we going to have the group that's going to keep Social Security going? Because if they don't have the skills, or if they're getting into trouble, they're not going to be able to raise or have good quality jobs and be able to make enough money that they're going to be able to fund the system for the future.
I like how you bring those issues together and make it intergenerational, that what we invest in our children comes back to us as we retire. Yeah, that is a very good point. Well, as we look at these issues, we have some, it's a rural state, it's an agricultural state, and ethanol is a big issue these days. Do you have any thoughts to share with us on that?
Well, I'm not an agricultural economist, but I can't even say it. But, you know, the part that's so hard about that is everybody wants to be less dependent on oil. Everybody thinks that it would be better to not have to depend on oil, but at the same time, the cost of land is going up. And I don't think that ethanol has shown that it really can be developed without some sort of subsidy. So if you take the subsidy away, it's going to be gone. On the other hand, all the water, which is such a precious resource, once that's gone, there's no easy way to just say, oh, we're going to have water back, or it's not renewable. And the cost in that respect is definitely an issue. And you know, I'm coming from South Dakota. I've spent some time over in southwestern Minnesota and seen the wind farms.
Oh,
And
really?
it's just amazing. You're going along and hear all these, and I've seen them in Hawaii, and they're miles and miles, and you'd be driving and trying to pay attention to driving, but at the same time trying to count how many windmills there are, and
Sure.
there are a couple out here north of Lincoln, but definitely Nebraska has a lot of wind, and so is that a better form of energy to serve? I haven't done a lot of research on it, but I am very concerned about water as one of our most important resources, and just that it's not going to come back if we use it.
Oh, I think that is so true. We have to go and ask those kinds of questions. We have to look at the broader picture. And then you were talking some about education, the investment of education. And public education in Nebraska, as throughout basically the United States, is funded by property taxes. And property taxes are bake sales, it seems like, and that's it. But there's a lot of people who are very concerned about property taxes. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm not sure how much property tax rates have gone up as much as people's property value has gone up.
No, I think that's a good point.
And, everybody wants, when the time comes to, sell their property, to have it be more expensive than, what they want to have gained, a capital gain there. But at the same time, when you look at somebody that has a fixed income, and all of a sudden the person that has, a minimal amount of money sees themselves almost being taxed out of their home, that's definitely a big challenge. But I don't know that I've got a poof answer for that either, because, there aren't. We're a rural state, like you said. We don't have a big tax base. What's the option? What else are we going to bring in here to be able to cover the property taxes? And if property taxes aren't being used for school. And I think everybody wants quality care, wants quality education, and that isn't cheap. Because at the same time you want the best people providing the service, you want the best books, you want the best technology, and all of those things are, again, that investment in the future. And so, I don't have the poof answer for it.
Sure.